Excuse me, sir, he answered, but the fact is the coal is wrong. We've had a poor lot lately, and today it's worse. The other engines can manage, they have big fireboxes. Henry's is small and can't make the heat. With Welsh coal, he'd be a different engine. It's expensive, said the Fat Controller, but Henry must have a fair chance.
Most people who model trains have that one. A favorite engine, maybe a favorite class of engine, a favorite custom maybe. And if you've watched almost any of my videos, you honestly could make a meme out of how often I call whatever I'm talking about my favorite. But today we'll be taking a look at something special. A model that I've kept a keen eye on, and one that's taken me since then to acquire. But we're here now, and the ever so beautiful C1 Atlantic has finally joined my collection. This is a favorite class of mine, right under the Dean's Goods, and that's something that I share with the Unlucky Tug and seemingly many other users, and understandably so. The class itself is beautiful, and I was hoping with everything in me when I actually got the model that it would live up to such, and well, I'm making this video. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we'll talk about the Bachmann C1 class. Now, before we get into the actual model, let me give you a brief history lesson on the class. The C1 class, as it was known under both GNR and LNER classifications, was designed by Henry Ivatt as an enlarged version of what became the LNER C2 class, which is basically a C1 with a smaller boiler. The principle of the design was to produce a powerful, free-steaming engine to haul the fastest and heaviest express trains on the Great Northern. They could thus be seen as the start of the East Coast big engine policy. The first engine, numbered 251, was introduced in 1902, with 80 more being built at Doncaster Works. Although they suffered from a number of teething troubles, the Atlantics were generally very successful, sometimes being called upon to haul trains of over 500 long tons, and were also known for reaching speeds of up to 90 miles an hour. Several different variants of the C1 were built, but eventually the class was superseded on the heaviest trains by the Gresley A1 Pacifics in the early 1920s. They continued to haul lighter expresses up until 1950, and often would put up remarkable performances, with loads far in excess of those they were designed to haul. One once took over the Flying Scotsman from a failed A3, this being at Peterborough, and not only made up time, but arrived early, so the class was more than capable of keeping up. The locomotive we discussed earlier, number 251, or LNER 2800, had been saved for the UK National Collection even before the last one was withdrawn, that being from the Revenue Service in 1950. She was restored to her GNR livery, and is the only C1 to survive. She is preserved along a sister locomotive, however, that being Henry Oakley. Both currently survive to today. Notably, 2 C1 boilers were discovered at a factory at Essex in 1986, one of them belonging to number 3287, though the revelation that the boiler once belonged to this locomotive wasn't revealed until 2005 by a pressure washer. That same boiler was in good condition, and purchased by the Bluebell Railway for their H2 project, while the other boiler was scrapped due to it being in very poor condition. That has nothing to do with the video, I just thought that was cool. But these locomotives have a little bit more history, especially when we look at Thomas & Friends. Most fans of Thomas & Friends know that the Railway series struggled with consistency, not necessarily at the fault of Awdry, but more in the fact that artists wouldn't keep specific designs. This is what led to Henry being a number of things, but in almost all media, he was never shown as what Awdry originally drew him as. Just like Awdry would draw Thomas as a J50, which I proudly have tattooed on my arm, he would also seemingly draw Henry as an Atlantic, as you can see in this illustration. Now, like I said, this was never really carried on into the TV series, even in the Railway series, but it was an idea that I myself enjoyed. Though I never really saw Henry in this way, I could always imagine it, and being that I liked the class so much, these two kind of worked hand in hand. So now that we know a little bit about the history of this thing, let's talk about the model of it, and why I was so excited to actually get one. The body itself is made of a pretty strong plastic, and the entire running board is die-cast, giving this model quite a bit of weight. One of the main things that makes this model so amazing to me is the amount of detail it has. I'm sure you can tell just by looking at it that this thing is jam-packed with it, but the closer we look, the more apparent this becomes. The lighting has been applied beautifully on the side, and there is an ample amount of separately fitted detail here. Everything from the whistles to the handrails themselves, everything is present, and all of the smaller details have also had quite a bit of effort put into them as well. One of my favorite parts has to be the lining on the undercarriage, which is very visible here on the tender. I don't know how they managed to do this, but it looks amazing and is something I'm very fond of. Speaking of the tender, the coal load inside of it looks spot on. It is a bit shiny for my liking, but to be fair, it's stock standard, and that can be doled out pretty easily, and is something I plan to do eventually, if I don't end up replacing the entire coal load with real coal. Not really sure I would have to though. Like I said, the coal load in this one is pretty nice. And the handrails on top of the tender are very sturdy. I've noticed through picking it up and handling it that the model is pretty well put together. I was worried that there would be a bunch of small details that would just pop off the moment I picked it up, but everything appears to be applied here pretty well. So far, I haven't had an issue, but if that changes, I'll be sure to let you guys know. Now, I can't talk about the detail this thing has without talking about its cab and its smoke box door, but let's start with the cab. The cab this thing has is beautifully detailed, and though this is something that not many people are gonna see, I really appreciate the fact that they put so much effort into such. There's also ample room to fit a crew should you want to do such, and the windows on the front side actually have a glazing. Now, like I said about the boiler front, I know this is something that a lot of model trains have, but it's the first that I've owned to actually do so. The boiler door actually opens and closes, and reveals actual detail that's inside of the boiler. It's not just the motor inside of there, and that has to be the coolest, if not one of my favorite details. Like I said, I know it's not very special, but it's special to me. It was my first time encountering such, and it really was a big shocker. Definitely a detail that I was happy to see. Aesthetically, this model is just beautiful. Everything from the valve gear to the lining, it's all been done not only accurately, but with care. And some of my favorite characteristics of the class itself have been captured with the model perfectly. The super large boiler, the way the curves in the boiler flow, it's all there, and it all looks amazing. I still would have to say Oxford Rail is probably my favorite OO manufacturer right now, but Bachmann is coming in very hot and very close, especially with this model. Aesthetically, in my opinion, it has to be one of the best, and I'm very happy to now have this in my collection. But as I'm sure some of you guys know, I did do some stuff to it. As you can see here, a lot of the detail is missing, and like most OO gauge trains, this is in a separate pack. This model came with not only that, but a decoder, one that I probably won't be using since I'm not a DCC guy, but for those interested, it does come included. Not only did I fit some of those extra details, but inevitably I would also fit a Henry face to it, and at the moment this serves as my Awdry styled Henry. I don't want to call this a custom since it's really not. All I did was remove the boiler door, which is able to be put back on, don't worry, and add a face. All of the separately fitted detail was from the model itself. It just needed to be applied. I guess I painted the shovels inside of his tinder too, but that's really about it. I didn't do a lot to customize this guy, and really I don't want to. I definitely may renumber him at some point, but I really enjoy this model, and I feel like doing any more may be wrong. Not only is this guy pretty expensive, and that's one of the biggest things that stopped me from getting one, and after getting a chance to look at this model, I can see the end result won't be much better than what I started with. And Bachmann's done a good job of making a model that's really perfect from the get-go. If you want, you can fit the separately fitted details. Personally, I would recommend you do. And you have a perfect C1 model. I just added a face since personally, I'm a fan of this being Henry, and I'm still trying to figure out how exactly this works. But that's been a big part of the fun of this. Not only seeing Henry in this style, but also trying to make it work, and make my own sort of headcanon for him. It's tricky, as I'm sure you can tell, but I'm sure I'll get there eventually. And regardless of his story, this is a model that I'm very proud to own. While it does come in at a pretty hefty price range, keep in mind these models are National Railway Museum exclusives, which between me and you guys is just a way for them to charge an extra $100. But if you're looking to get one of these things for yourself, be prepared to pay about $300 US. Unfortunately, it's not a cheap buy, and that was one of the biggest reasons I didn't get one for myself. The only reason I was actually able to find this one was with the help of Marvin Jerry, who sent me a link to one that was up for about 140 pounds, roughly 220 USD. And as I'm sure you can tell, I jumped at the opportunity, and now this dude has finally joined my collection, and I have to say he was worth every penny. Now, for being such an expensive model, there are a few things that I wish the model did include. For example, sprung buffers, which are not fitted on this model, or maybe the inclusion of an actual crew. There's also a single lamp inside of the detail pack, which is kinda like, really just one? I don't know, for such an expensive price range, I do have to say I was expecting a little more. But after seeing the detail and taking this model in, can kinda understand why it's up there. Altogether, this model is an easy 9 out of 10. The only thing stopping it from having that perfect score being the fact it doesn't have things like sprung buffers, and that it's so expensive. If you're like me and you get lucky and are able to find this guy for a cheaper price, by all means jump on it. But be warned, on some sites like eBay, these guys can go for ridiculous amounts of money. And really, maybe it's not worth a ridiculous amount of money. I don't even recommend this model for customization. If you're a collector like me, and maybe it's a class or model that you're eager to have, then it's definitely a recommended buy from me. But because it's so expensive, personally, I'd have to warn against doing too much to him, and also for trying to source one yourself. It's definitely not worth 400 to 500 pounds, and I've seen some sell for about that price, and really, I can't say it's worth that. But the 220 I actually paid and the 300 I was prepared to pay, yeah, I'd say that was pretty worth it. Just try to get it in that price range. And now that we've talked so much about the model itself, and we know why I enjoy it so much, let's see it in action. Because one of the best things about this model is just seeing it. So let me stop boring you guys with the details and show you. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe for even more train content. There's always more stuff on the way. And I hope you guys enjoyed taking a look at my custom Alfred, I'm kidding, my new C1 Atlantic model that's serving as my Awdry Henry. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
The Fat Controller spoke to him too. You're too expensive, Henry. You had lots of new parts and new paint too, but they've done you no good. If we can't make you better, we must get another engine instead of you.
Psych! Yeah.